Welcome to the 2021-2022 World Language Webinar Series. Today's broadcast is on the Learning Experience Domain LE4. This is part 2 of a broadcast. Part 1 was on January 5th. Today is Wednesday, February 2nd. As we know, celebrated as Groundhog's Day in the U.S. and as other holidays around the world. So I hope you're having a great Wednesday. Our agenda is coming up on the screen. We're going to start with some welcome questions and some introductions. Then we're going to do an overview of the TEL criteria and sub-criteria that we're focusing on today. You see it there on the screen. LE4 is the teacher provides opportunities for students to produce language in the interpersonal and presentational modes. This is an important one for us here in North Carolina because, of course, interpersonal and presentational communication modes are 2 of our 4 standards. After that, we'll have some reflections on implementing LE4 with our proficiency-based North Carolina World Language Essential Standards. We'll also examine some evidence of LE4 characteristics and behaviors in K-12 world language classrooms, and then we'll have a wrap-up and some reminders before we head out for today. All right, let's get underway with our welcome and introductions. We are glad all of you are here today. We get to use the WebEx event space for our webinars this year. You see on the screen a screenshot of how the control panel may look for you. Obviously, it might look a little bit different depending on what type of device you joined with us today, as well as which browser you happen to choose. We always advise people to use Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, as those are the most compatible with WebEx. Take a look at your control panel right now. It probably appears in the upper right of your screen if you're on a computer, or it should be visible on your device as well. Starting in the upper right corner, there are some buttons there that you can change your video layout. All that we're showing right now is the actual screens, the slides on our screen. And as I said before, we usually minimize the use of video just because of how much bandwidth that takes up on our Wi-Fi systems. But you can change it around. You can choose a floating panel view and position the panel in different places on your screen to where you're comfortable. There in the middle, you'll see the meeting controls. Those usually are hidden when you're not using them, so you may have to mouse over them to make them appear when you want them. But there are several to note there. The first, of course, are some of the middle ones where you can click on them and go to the chat box and things like that. The red buttons on each end are also important. The one on the left shows your microphone, and as I noted before, everyone is on mute so that we can cut down on the background noise with our recording. On the other side, the red button with an X through it is a picture of the exit button. When we're all done today, you'll click that, and that will exit you from our broadcast. If something happens, you accidentally hit that or something like that during the broadcast, don't worry. Just use the same link to come back in as you used to get in originally. It should work just fine. You see also there's a place there for accessing the meeting details and information. So please take a look at your control panel so that you're ready to use that. I do want to introduce our guest speakers. She is still solving her tech problems, but in general, for this entire series, we are featuring world language teachers across the state of North Carolina who've distinguished themselves by earning Teacher of the Year honors through FLANK or NC Virtual. FLANK, of course, is the Foreign Language Association of North Carolina. That's our state professional organization for language learning, K-20. Also, we have some guest speakers who have earned their Global Educator Digital Badge, or GEDB. Obviously, world language educators who have done that, completed all the professional development needed for it, and created a capstone project that they share within our statewide systems. Just to give you a little background information about our guest speakers and the different kinds of recognitions that they've been awarded, I am going to put in the chat box now a list of those kinds of awards that they can get, that FLANK Teacher of the Year Awards, the NC Virtual page for teachers, and our North Carolina Global Educator Digital Badge information on the Global Recognitions page. Use those links to find out more about how these teachers have distinguished themselves and what they have done, and maybe you could do in the future to earn these kinds of recognitions or designations. Today we have with us Rosalyn Rhodes. Sometimes she's known as Rose. She was the Teacher of the Year for Flank for the K-12 award in 2015, so not very long ago at all. She's at Carmel Middle School, that's in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she teaches Spanish 1A and 1B, exploratory Spanish, and then Spanish for native speakers 1A and 1B. Some of you might remember that you can teach high school credit classes to middle school students in world languages, and at the middle school level you have the option to break them into an A and a B. So one half of the course, let's say 6th grade year, and the other half during their 7th grade year, combining to make Spanish 1. That puts our students ahead by taking advantage of those um, policies that do that, because then they enter high school with world language credit already on their transcripts and ready to go. As I noted, Roslyn is from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools at a middle school there. I see her coming back in, so hopefully she's solved her tech problems. If so, she can unmute and tell you a little bit about the pictures on the screen of her.
Did.
Yes, fabulous. You're just in time. Please go ahead and share a little bit about where you teach and your students.
Hi, I am Rosalyn Rhodes, and I am a Spanish teacher at Carmel Middle School and in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. And I teach 6th grade exploratory Spanish. And I also teach Spanish 1 in 7th grade, Spanish 1A, Spanish 1B in 8th grade. And I also have a class of Spanish for native speakers, which last year was 1A, and they have the continuation into 1B for this year as well. That's what I teach. And I have roughly, I don't know, 100 and some odd, 130 students, and across the different classes, sounds about right. And they are in a traditional middle school, so 6th grade through 8th grade, and they all have elected to take Spanish with us.
All right. And do you want to talk a little bit about the pictures you chose to share with us today, Roslyn?
Absolutely. These are they kind of went with the theme. We are talking about interpersonal speaking and using how we set up our classroom for activities about interpersonal speaking. And the pictures that I have here are my kids from this year working with aides, with some doing conversation practice, using different images to try to figure out how to talk to each other, ask and answer questions, find out information, and all of that. And then we do a lot of hands-on creation of stuff, and then we conduct a class in Spanish so that they can get a lot more Spanish into their brain and able to respond to me in Spanish visually with a whole bunch of manipulatives of different stuff to show me that they understand. Sorry, end of the day. To show me that they understand what we're doing.
Great. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot to share with us later on, because as I said, Roslyn is our guest speaker for today. We have been inviting different people to talk about their classrooms and talk about what evidence they can share for the particular tell criteria that we're looking at for that day. So we will hear more from her later on, and we will go ahead and move forward and go over the basics as well as some other introductions. All right, well, now that you know our guest speaker a little bit, well, let's go ahead and find out who you are. One question I always like to ask is, what motivated you to participate in this webinar today? Was it to access professional development made for world languages? Was it to earn one contact hour for license renewal? Is it to gather information to share with others? Is it to learn about implementing our state standards from other world language teachers? Or did you want to find out more about state standards, resources, policies, and that kind of thing? I'll go ahead and launch our poll. It should be on your control panel. One moment, please. All right, let's launch the first poll so you can share what motivated you to join us today. There you go. You should be able to click on all the answers that apply to you in your control panel. All right, we've got about 20 more seconds. Looks like almost everyone has answered. I think we're getting better at these polls. All right, thank you for sharing. We're going to go ahead and share the poll results with you as well so that you can see them. As you can see, almost everybody is here to earn that 1 contact hour for license renewal or to assess professional development made for world languages. And those are 2 of the main reasons we have created the World Language Webinar Series. We want to make sure that you have access to professional development that is specific to our world language standards and other concerns that we have as world language teachers. We also want to give you the opportunity to be earning contact hours towards license renewal throughout the year. So this World Language Webinar Series has 10 broadcasts. You can earn 1 contact hour for each broadcast, which adds up to 10 contact hours or 1 CEU, obviously with the permission of your district or charter school. We also have an asynchronous credit option if anyone's listening to this recording that we'll talk about later. Also, other motivating factors were to learn about implementing our state standards from other world language teachers. Teachers do learn best from each other, and so this particular series is always designed to help you learn from others across the state who you may only get to meet either electronically like this or perhaps at conferences. We also have people who are gathering information to share with others, maybe their colleagues, their team, their PLC, maybe their department, their school, or even their whole district. This information will be posted. I always post the archives from our broadcast, including this recording. The slides we use in 3 different formats, Google Slides, PowerPoint, and PDF. Therefore, you can download those and repurpose the slides. You don't have to recreate them. And then any handouts or links that we use. Finally, there are also a good number of people here who just want to find out more about our state standards, resources, policies, and so on. And you'll definitely get that opportunity today. Please know that we have a nice broadcast planned for you that should take a full hour. But also, if we don't answer your question about policies or standards during that, you can always ask us privately, no problem. I do see one question about why can't the people see who else is present. I think that feature has been turned off in the latest update, so no worries there. For the next broadcast, we will make sure we turn that on. All right, next question though. Where are you joining us from today? We live in a virtual world, and we've actually had this World Language Webinar Series some years before the pandemic, but we want to know where you're located today as you're joining us. So I'm going to put this question out in the poll. You should be able to see it and let us know where you're at today. What region of the state? These regions, by the way, these 8 regions that you see are part of the economic prosperity zones, divisions within the state, as well as the regions that are represented our State Board of Education. State Board of Education meetings are actually going on today and tomorrow, and there's a representative from each of the regions you see on the screen. We also know we may have people joining us from outside of North Carolina or even outside of the U.S., because you never know where someone might be located. All right. I think our poll might have cut off, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Look like we have attendees from all across the state, pretty much. Only a few regions don't have somebody here for the actual live broadcast, and we even have 1 or 2 people from outside of North Carolina. So welcome everyone. It's so good to be together as world language educators. All right, well, let's get into our work today with an overview of our TEL criteria and sub-criteria, LE4. As we start to look at that, we always want to remind ourselves how this incorporates with our work with implementing our North Carolina World Language Essential Standards. So LE4 looks at the teacher providing opportunities for students to produce language in the interpersonal and presentational modes. You can see there on the screen are what we call our weave graphic that shows our 4 essential standards and how they weave together with our 3 strands, as well as have proficiency outcomes for our state standards. Take a look. Interpersonal communication, which is that informal communication usually done in speaking or sometimes texting, is standard number 1. And then standard number 3 is similar, but it's presentational communication, where you have formal speaking where you can rehearse what you're going to say, like to give a presentation, or writing, where you might draft something and then get feedback and so forth and make it better. So interpersonal is very spontaneous. There's no time really for correction, but there is time to ask clarifying questions if you don't understand something with the person you're talking to or texting with. With presentational communication, there's plenty of time to rehearse or revise what you're presenting in the language so that you can get it where it needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and put links to our administrator guides. This graphic that you see, the weave graphic and the explanation of our standards, is on page 1 of all 3 of our administrator guides. These are designed for each K-12 program we have in World Languages and our World Language Essential Standards. So there's a link to the Classical Languages one, and that's for classical languages like Latin or Ancient Greek. There's a link to the one for dual and heritage languages, which are courses like what Rosalyn talked about, the Spanish for native speakers or Spanish heritage language courses, as well as dual language immersion or DLI. And finally, there's the modern languages administrator guide, and it's for languages that are taught as a separate subject. All right, please take a look. Get what you need as far as the administrator guides. They're always a valuable resource, and they're designed to do just what they say. They're administrator guides for world languages, and so you're encouraged to share them with your administrator, whether that's your principal, an assistant principal, or someone else who might be, for example, doing a walkthrough in your classroom or observing you to evaluate you. Because this administrator guide is designed to help that person understand what our world language essential standards look like, and how they should be implemented in the classroom. Oftentimes, our administrators that we work with do not come from a world language teaching background, and they may only have the knowledge of what learning a world language was like for them as a student in high school or college. So this is a way to educate them about our 21st century world language teaching with a communicative approach and building proficiency. All right. Well, we want you to have a lot of handouts, and the second handout, our second activity, is downloading the handout. As I said, we're focusing on the TEL learning experience domain. TEL is the teacher effectiveness for language learning. It's a national project. They have a number of resources and tools that look at best practices in world language classrooms. And we're looking at their learning experience domain specifically to look at LE4, but also to look at the other criteria and subcriteria there to help us reflect on our own teaching practice. So I put those in the chat box. Please download the PDF version from our Google Drive or go over to the TEL Framework webpage and download the learning experience domain criteria. You'll see it's marked 2019 in both cases, and that's because the TEL project itself, when it first published the domain and the handouts that you see here, was in 2014, some years ago. So they updated those fairly recently and published them in their updated formats in 2019. So that's what we're using. Go ahead and download a copy for yourself and skim the 5-lettered subcriteria for this session's focus, the LE4 that you see there on the screen. I'll pause for a moment while you do that. All right, I hope you've got what you need and you've got it handy. You can even print it out if you're the kind of person who likes a hard copy of handouts. You're welcome to do that. All right, so let's now reflect on implementing LE4 with our North Carolina World Language Essential Standards, because we're always focused on how we implement our standards and how we can improve our practice in doing so. The TEL criteria for LE4 and its subcriteria are as follows, and you can see these on your handout. A looks at the teacher facilitating activities that allow students to interact with others and negotiate meaning for a real-world purpose. Obviously, that speaks to interpersonal communication because you're interacting, and you're negotiating for meaning, which means that on the fly or very spontaneously, you have to ask for clarifications and reframe things if someone doesn't understand. And always we want to be focused on a real world purpose for using language. B is much the same. The teacher facilitates activities that allow students to share a message with an audience. And this is getting more towards presentational communication, as you can see, because sharing a message in whatever format you do it with an audience involves some preparation. So that's our presentational communication standard. C is the teacher facilitates activities that allow students to produce language within the range of the performance targets. As I said, we have proficiency-based state standards in North Carolina. We were the first state to have those when we officially rolled them out in 2010, but many states have followed our lead, and we are happy to know how things are going with that. And so this subcriteria really helps us focus on that because we want students to be producing language and within the range of their performance targets. So those proficiency outcomes that we have, we want them to be producing language within that range and sometimes above that range because performance leads to the building of proficiency when they are outside of the classroom and the context of learning. D is the teacher provides students with strategies that enable them to stay in the target language. Rosalyn mentioned in her introduction that she works hard to make sure students stay in the target language, and we know that our goal is 90% or more in the target language we're teaching. And so as a teacher, we're always looking at ways that we can help our students stay in the target language in whatever kind of activity or practice they're in with the language. And finally, E, the teacher consciously monitors teacher talk in order to maximize student opportunities to produce language. So we always have to be thinking about how much we're talking in a classroom versus how much we let students talk, and how do we balance that? How do we consider their needs and make sure that we're giving them opportunities to produce language in all of the things that we've looked at here with a real world purpose, in ways where they're interacting with each other, negotiating meaning, or sharing a message with an audience? How do we make sure we're supporting that production of language for them? So those are our criteria. And now that you've seen them and you're taking a look at them on your handout, I want you to consider this question. When you think about your teaching and how your students learn, which of the sub-criteria are professional strengths for you? You can choose up to 3. There are 5 here total. And this poll question actually is a couple minutes long because you may want to think this through and really consider which of these are professional strengths for you as a teacher. I'll go ahead and open the poll and you can start sharing your responses. Got about a minute left to get answers in on professional strengths. All right, 10 more seconds. Be sure you get those in. Thank you. I'll go ahead and show our poll results so that you can see them too. Notice that over half of you said that both A and B are professional strengths for you. That's great news because those are the ones that look directly at our essential standards, standard number 1 with A and standard number 3 with B. Also, almost half of you said that C was a professional strength where you allow students to produce language within the range of the performance targets in our standards. A little over a third said that D was a professional strength where you're providing strategies to students to stay in the target language. And about a fifth of you, 21%, said you have E as a professional strength where you consciously monitor your teacher talk so that you maximize student opportunities for language. All right, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we want to continue to think about our professional strengths in relation to the LE4 subcriteria as we move on to the next part. This is where Roslyn gets to share with you her strengths and how those look in her classroom. Roslyn, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi.
take it away.
All right. Well, to start out with, I think that I kind of want to go backwards. I thought about doing ACE, but I want to speak to the thing about monitoring teacher talk first and then talk activities and things after that. Because that's the one that I think when you plan, at least for me, when I plan, I have to have a column for myself where I look at what am I doing and what are my students doing? Like, how much of this lesson, we have 70-minute periods for all of my classes, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, we're all 70 minutes. So within that amount of time, what is the flow of my lesson? What is the flow of what I'm working on? And how do I design the movie, right, of my whole class period with the balance of what they can do and what they are constantly doing and working with the language. How many touch points do they get with the language versus how much am I blabbing on? Even if it's in Spanish, right? Even if I speak in Spanish, if I am speaking the whole time, I am the one doing all of the work. And for what we have to do, they're going to freak out. I get a lot more stress from my students when I've been the one talking the whole time and they haven't had the opportunity. And then I chuck something at them like a speaking activity. And they're like, but Senora, you definitely did all of the speaking this whole time. We just listened, and then we can't actually, they aren't feeling prepared to do any sort of interaction with each other. And so I think for me in the planning stage of what I do, really looking at, wow, I made this really cool lesson and the whole thing is me. So maybe I have to switch out, I have to chuck out this activity that I was thinking of that would be very cool for them because that's just me talking. So that's the thing, consciously monitoring everything about what I do now opposed to what I have done, I think in my kind of growth as a teacher is being much more intentional in my planning, and being more intentional in my planning has allowed the students to get more stuff done, and to have more opportunities for actual speaking and doing. So that's definitely an issue that is important to me as far as just monitoring my own domination of a conversation in my classroom. So as we move backwards then, we're going to look at the producing language within the range of the performance targets. I teach baby novice speakers for 5 out of the 6 classes that I teach, and even some of my heritage speakers are kind of more novice in some of their areas. But I teach novice kids, and my speaking and what I'm expecting them to do has to have a couple of things. It has to be heavily supported with them having something like an aid of some sort of manipulative, some sort of scaffold for them to be able to really feel confident. So like if they're going to talk about themselves and maybe do a quiz trade activity with a card that I'll give them this like quiz trade activity that has a name of a person and maybe an emotion and a color. So they have something in their hand And then they go around and they try to find out how many other people have the same favorite color as them, or have the same name as them, or have a similar letter in their name, or are feeling the same way or something. So those are very built like novice questions that we've practiced, we've taught, that we've worked on it, and now they get to go around as they have the information, they get to go around with something in their hand to kind of help edge into asking and answering those questions and finding out stuff, because having just some scaffold is really kind of helps with their with their confidence level, even though it doesn't have a question on it, right? They're not reading a card, we're still having an interpersonal conversation that's real, but it has information on it that they can draw from to go, oh yeah, I know how to ask, or respond when somebody asks me about how I'm feeling today. So there's using some sort of thing that they have. My other kids have chat mats. We use all kinds of chat mats that have lots of images in them. Amy Leonard has amazing chat mats with pictures and some sentence starters and some stuff to just kind of help, because you have to make sure, or I have to make sure in my classroom, that if I'm asking them to do something, it's within the range of their performance target, their actual like novice range or their intermediate range if I'm with some other students, with my heritage kids. Because this whole idea of, if I ask them to do something and I don't give them any support, and I just say, go find out how many 10 kids, go look for 3 people who have the same favorite color as you. They are going to walk up to somebody in English and go, what's your favorite color? And then write it down. And maybe they'll write it down in Spanish, but they're going to ask them in English because I did not prepare them well enough. And if I say, okay, to my novice 6th graders who I just got 3 days ago, go find out why their favorite color is purple, or why their favorite animal is the jaguar. That's beyond, why is beyond what they're able to do at this point, right? So you have to know what your levels are, so you have an expectation that's realistic, and then you have to support it with, you have to give the kids enough different times to practice and support it with that. As far as, let's see, activities, we do a ton of things. We have Jenga games that have a lot of questions. Just like, we put questions, we give them these Jenga papers, and play Jenga. They just draw a Jenga blocks and ask questions. I sit in a lot of times. The activities that we do in small groups. I start with pairs sometimes, or sometimes I start in groups of 4 at this point. And so they can talk to the person in front of them, the person to the side of them, and then the person diagonally from them, to give 3 different options of, have this whole, find out this information. And when you put it in a way where I'm giving them, for my novice kids at least, I'm providing them questions and they know the sentence starter, or they know what they're trying to get to, and they can look on the board or they can look on their chat mat. They have this option to, they have more confidence to be able to continue asking those questions. So we use a lot of Jenga. We play a lot of games, different games that are questioning, asking and answering questions about anything, whatever content we happen to be working on, because describing things and asking about how the world works or how the world looks is kind of where my 6th, 7th, and 8th graders live right now. And let's see, with my native speakers, we just finished a really cool art unit about all kinds of different stuff, where they got to learn about a lot of different artists and then react to art that they had never seen, and have conversations about and kind of defend their opinion about art and artists and muralists and graffiti artists and cool stuff like that. So we had the activity that we worked on for like negotiating meaning is we practiced with them, or we made this activity where they had to pick their favorite art piece and then pretend that they were like at a restaurant or at some sort of event and talking about that. And then somebody was going to come up to them and they had to escape. Like that person that came up to them, it was very persistent about like, this is my favorite thing and I love this and I want to talk to you about it so much. So we practiced like the real world purpose of like, how do you get away from somebody nicely? And how do you, so we worked on like, what is protocol to talk to somebody and then say, oh, thank you so much. My friend is over here. And they thought that was really fun because we tried to see how many people that you could nicely escape from. And so those are kind of some starting ideas. Anne Marie, I honestly don't know how much time I have to talk. I don't remember what you said. But I have a lot of activities that we create and we work on giving them support. I think the basic idea with any sort of activity for interacting with others is you have to have a reason to do it. So that's the most important thing is they have to have some sort of reason. Looking at somebody that you already know that you've been in school with since you were 5 and saying, hey, what's your name? Just to practice, hey, what's your name? Is boring for anybody, right? They already know their names. They know each other's names. I'm the only one that doesn't know their name. So I interact with them a lot at the beginning of those types of things, trying to find out stuff. And then you look at questions that still fit maybe the structure you're working with or the purpose that you're looking at. And you try to find other interesting, kind of more relevant ways to do that. Something that easily connects to them, like cartoons, or something that's way out of their field, like some kind of high level art, or an image that is really thought provoking, that is at their like mental level, but maybe not at their language level. And then you interact with one of those images or one of those art pieces with a base conversation or a structure that you've worked in, like a sentence pattern that you've worked with. And that's kind of how I do it. So I use a lot of manipulatives, a lot of cards and images of all kinds of things, and then scaffold things with sentence starters or questions that they know that they can practice, and then ways to get out of that question, right? The ways to ask and say, oh, you have to, and giving them things like, I don't understand, could you repeat that? You know, there's a whole set of, for my 8th graders, they like to ask that why. We're getting into this edge of like, they could ask why and they can give me a reason why they like the thing. And they like to have those reasons, right? If we were talking about food and then I gave them texture, flavor, smell, and I think that was it, texture, flavor, and smell. So then that opened up a whole world in their conversation to be able to say, I like this, you know, it leveled up their whole like, I don't like with foods, for I like it because I like the texture. And just giving them that one little extra piece of language allowed them to really level up what they were doing. So that's what I do. Questions?
Yeah, that was great, Roslyn. Thank you for sharing how you set it up for your students, especially middle school students, which can sometimes be hard to motivate or a little harder than some students of other ages. Um, Particularly like your examples of real world purpose. You're right, our students know each other's names typically, but we have to think about other real world purpose kinds of things they could discuss. Um, you are getting some comments. Um, Flora says that it's great because you are practicing mindfulness as well. And they've also commented that students need to sort of touch the language. I like that, in quotes, touch the language. And this person is also a PE teacher. What a great combination, world languages and PE, especially when we think about touching the language and being active with the language.
We do a lot of really fun yoga. It's not speaking, but we do a lot of yoga in Spanish when we, to just get brain breaks in between activities and things. And so for your PE teacher, we do a lot of of movement-based stuff, and stand up if this, and stand up if that, and squat down, and number. We count things and we try to make our bodies into the different shapes of different stuff that we're learning, which is alphabet. Oh yeah, alphabet things. When we were spelling our names and you tried to spell your name and say it at the same time, that was kind of fun. Just to put breaks in when you are like building your activities. I have brain breaks actually built in our lesson planning document. So it forces the stopping in our plan to just, oh yeah, we have to, I can't keep going here. I put them in this, I put a brain break slide in my slide deck, and I put a brain break space across our planning thing. So
yeah, and that's definitely important to remember whether we're transitioning from like activity to take a brain break, or to make sure we're breaking up the class period, particularly if you teach in a block schedule. It sounds like you do, Roslyn. Making sure that time sort of has a stopping point and then a starting point for the next thing, and something in between, but still in the target language, like you said.
and that's what makes it fun, is that making sure that their interactions with me are in the target language. And if I have a big poster over here of a bunch of different stuff, your basic classroom types of things, but I don't have to teach that. I just can point to it because it's got an image and it's got the question. They can ask it to me and I can respond to them. And getting around the classroom or having to go places or do things, and it really helps kind of facilitate that target language conversation, because there's no reason not to. Like that was one of my really early things, was when I realized that I could do so much more in my classroom in the target language. Like there was no reason I should have used English just then. I could have, that Spanish wasn't complicated and it was a movement. So use Spanish because you can, and they can get it because they get so much more than you think they do. And I find that to be really fun. But I do think that as you build your lesson, it won't come together, those opportunities to use Spanish. You'll end up using English if you didn't think about it, if you weren't intentional in the way that you were planning and you were thinking about your activities. If I didn't have the cards to hand them, to have them see all of these little bitmojis on this card of this person, or the different colors, or the Jenga questions already done, or my chat mats, or whatever it is that I'm doing, if I haven't planned and I haven't intentionally said, okay, this is all going to be in Spanish this way, and here are the supports for my students, they'll fall into English, and that's not their fault, right? It's, if I haven't figured out and thought about like what are they going to need to not use English, then when they use English, you're like, yeah, that was on me. I didn't give them the thing that they necessarily needed. How do I deal with emotional issues? In what way? Me? There's a question in the chat.
Yeah, they're saying yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I try not to use English to translate the target language for that question. Emotional issues with students. Like if a particular student is having a bad day, or if there's some sort of something that's going on. We do SEL check-ins at the beginning with emotions, but that's in Spanish because we've learned it. So they have they have options, but it's not public. Like, so if I have a student that's having a bad day about something, or I know that they just came in from third block and third block was really rough, or something has happened, or whatever that is, that's to the side, that's quiet with them, and that's in English. I'm not going to push the 90% Spanish at the expense of a child. That's not where I'm at. If a child needs something, then we work to take care of whatever that need is. That's outside, I think, of the scope of the lesson planning part. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, they're saying yes. And that is an
Okay,
important thing to remember. We do want to stay in the target language, but all of us as teachers first, regardless of what we teach, right, are there to connect with the students and make sure that they
yes,
have what they need. That's how they'll
correct.
be successful. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, let's go ahead then and continue this conversation with Roslyn and with each other and talk about examining evidence of those LE4 characteristics and behaviors. So what do you see in K-12 world language classrooms for this if you go looking for it? You just heard some great examples from Roslyn. And during the part one of this broadcast for LE4, we asked this question: what do teachers and our students do in the classroom to show evidence of LE4 subcriteria? I think it's important for us to think about that and look at it. Some of you may have even been here for part one and entered something on the Jamboard. I put the link to the Jamboard in the chat box for you. But if we click on that bit.ly link, we go over the Jamboard. And for those of you who don't know, Jamboard is a Google tool, so it's free. And you notice here we've divided our Jamboard into the different subcriteria because we asked people last time to identify a subcriteria they want to talk about and to answer the question, what do teachers and students do in the classroom in order to demonstrate this LE4? So you can see they put different things. So there's several answers there for A, several for B. And if you slide over to the next part of the Jamboard up at the top, you can see that some people answered for C as well as D or E or just in general, and they didn't label anything with a particular subcriteria letter. But this is a resource we have for our thinking about LE4 in particular. So obviously for thinking about implementing our standards. So given our time, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next activity, but you stay on the Jamboard because we're going to get a chance to add to that. Our activity number 4 is the Jamboard. And like I said, the question that we asked last time was what characteristics in our behaviors would someone observe in your world language classroom if they were looking for evidence for one of the LE4 subcriteria? And so I'm going to have you think about those LE4 subcriteria again, and you're going to get to write about them, either what's already there that you're reading about or something new. It's your choice. But on the sticky note you create for the Jamboard activity, you're going to title your post with the letter of the subcriteria you're talking about so that we can sort it into the right spot, A, B, C, D, or E. You're going to write your response to that question. What characteristics or behaviors would someone observe in your world language classroom if they were looking for evidence? Write that in about 2 sentences or less. You can include your name on the sticky or you can remain anonymous. It's totally up to you. You can take a few minutes to check out the other ideas that are there on the Jamboard. And we'll do this activity for about 6 minutes. So we have just enough time to finish this up today before we head out. So quick question, because I am going to show you how to post things on a Jamboard if you need it. Please raise your electronic hand on the control panel if you already know what a Jamboard is. Raise your electronic hand if you already know about Jamboard in Google. All right, I'm seeing a couple of hands. Okay, so a couple people, maybe a couple more. Okay, so this may be a new tool. A couple people answering the chat. Oh, good. Well, Jamboard, like I said, is free. It's one of the Google tools, just like a Google Doc is or a Google Spreadsheet or something like that. And the way it works is, if you're on the Jamboard especially, you can see this. You can see that there's a little control panel usually on the left side. To put a sticky, you just click on the little sticky note on the control panel. That opens it up for you right here, like this on the screen. You can change the color of your sticky note. You saw there were different colors already on the Jamboard with yellow, green, blue, pink, and orange. You write your response there on the sticky note, and then you hit save, and that posts your sticky note. So once you get that done, once you get your sticky note posted, you can also move it around a little bit if you need to. Maybe put it in the right spot with the other subcriteria that it goes with. But that's how you do the sticky. So, like I said, I'm going to ask you that question. What characteristics or behaviors would someone observe in your world language classroom if they're looking for evidence for one of the LE4 subcriteria? So you've got your assignment. Go ahead and either add to maybe what someone else has said. Just post a new sticky note next to theirs if you're adding to the information, or do a brand new one and answer that question anew, and then be sure you label your sticky with the subcriteria letter. Let's go ahead and do that, and we can all do that. Roslyn, that includes you and me if we want to add to the sticky. So I'll go ahead and time us. Please go ahead and do this activity with the sticky notes on the Jamboard. Oh, it looks like we're having some technical problems with the Jamboard. Give me just a moment and let me fix that. I may have changed the sharing settings a bit too early. I did. That's my fault. I'm going to change those back to editor so you can go ahead and continue to post on this Jamboard. There you go. Sorry about that. Probably close that out after the last broadcast, but now you should be able to add sticky notes to it. All right, I have confirmation that it's fixed, so please go ahead and let's do our Jamboard activity. You can add to another sticky note, just pile those sticky notes together if you need to, if you're talking about the same kind of thing that was already shared. Notice there's a wide variety of activities and things, much like Rosalyn talked to us about, the things she does with her students with art units in different ways, having them practice getting away from a conversation, those real world examples. So you might want to jump onto somebody else's, or you might have a new one you want to share for a particular criteria that you do in your classroom. This is a good opportunity for you to learn from other world language teachers and to share your experience and expertise too. All right, let's jump over to the Jamboard and see how things are going. I I see you've added several stickies here just to our first page, and you're using the other tools on the Jamboard too to connect, literally with lines, to some of the other things that are posted there. That's a wonderful idea. Thank you. See how we're doing? Oh, same thing happening over here on page 2 of our Jamboard. That's great. And like I said, this will be here for us to continue to add to. The Jamboard and this activity and all the things we've done today become part of our archive. So you'll be able to come back to this, take a look at it. You'll be able to replicate these activities if this is something you want to do maybe with your colleagues, or even if you want to use Jamboard with your students to use the target language in class. Remember, this is a good way for them to share messages and things like that and do different activities. All right, we're right at about our time. So we're going to go ahead and finish out today. If we run a little bit over, I apologize, but that's okay. We had some tech problems and we got through them. If you can stay for the rest, that'd be great. If not, we will wish you well and see you soon. We are to our wrap up and reminders, so we're right on time with that. Please know you can sign up for any of our listservs that you would like to, so you can get information about things like our World Language webinar series and announcements and messages that pertain to world language teachers. By virtue of coming to this broadcast, I will make sure that your email address is on the World Language Instructors listserv. That's the one for K-20 World Language Teachers. But you can take that link I just sent you in the chat and also sign up for the other ones for World Languages or any of the other NCDPI listservs that you have an interest in. There are ones for global education, charter schools, different grade levels, even for K-12 legislative updates if you want those kinds of things too. This is our series, as you know, and we are providing everything, the materials and things like that in the archives, as it says here. This was part 2 of our LE4, so we're closing that out today. That's why the dates are grayed out. And then the archives will be available until March 16th for the asynchronous credit option. We've been trying to balance out how long we keep our asynchronous credit option open before our next part of the series starts. So for LE4, part 1 and part 2, you can do asynchronous credit options through March 16th. So if you're here with us today on part 2 but didn't do part 1, it's still available and you can make that happen. Coming up, we have 2 parts left, so 4 webinars total because there's a part 1 and part 2 for all of them. We're going to focus on learning experience 5, that subcriteria, and then performance and feedback 1 in the next 2 parts 1 and 2 of the series. If you want information about our series or want to find the archives and the asynchronous credit options, you just go to the World Language Webinar Series Canvas Hub, putting those links in the chat box as well. I love that we have the bit.ly link, bit.ly/WL and NC webinars, as you can get to that information very quickly, or those archives if you're going to repurpose those and share them locally with colleagues. Don't forget, if you participate in the live broadcast of an NCDPI World Language webinar, you will earn a certificate of participation towards license renewal. That will come to you as an attachment on an email. And so look for that about 1 week from today. It takes a little while to process them and get them through and issued, but please be patient. You'll get those about a week from today. And also note what it says on the screen, that our public school units, our PSUs, that's our districts and charter schools, must approve professional development offerings in all formats. And that's true for everything. And some districts and schools have a very specific process, and others are a little more flexible in the way they approach that. But keep that in mind, and everything will be on your certificate that you need to present to them. That's it for today. We thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Anne-Marie Gunter, the World Languages Consultant, your go-to person at NCDPI for any questions. You see my email, phone number, and contact information. Please keep in mind we've got some new updated web pages and whatnot. I'll put my contact information and all of that you see on the screen in the chat box for you in case you need it. We also have a new website, our NCDPI landing page is at bit.ly/NC World Languages. And so that's something to keep in mind too. Also, as part of our World Language team at NCDPI is my supervisor. Her name is Dr. Stacy Daniel. She is the section chief of English Language Arts and Languages, which encompasses ESL and also world languages. In addition, we have Teresa Parker behind the scenes. She's our administrative specialist for the section. She's the one who will be sending you the email with your certificate attached for participating today. Again, thank you to everyone for joining. We hope you've learned something that you can take back and use in your classroom to start implementing our standards more effectively, or maybe from a different perspective now that you've learned from um, our guest speaker, Rosalyn Rhodes, as well as other teachers on the Jamboard. Roslyn, thank you so much for sharing today. We loved having you here and learning from you about how you motivate your middle school students to get involved with interpersonal and presentational communication.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording and wish everyone a great evening.